Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Jai Sri Ramakrishna. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Yesterday was the Tithi Puja, or the lunar birthday of Swami Yogananda. Swami Yogananda, of course, when we say Swami Yogananda, we think very often of Paramahansa Yogananda. But by Swami Yogananda, what we mean is the direct apostle of Sri Ramakrishna. He was the first person to disappear from the play of life. That is, one by one, fairly early, the immediate apostles of Ramkrishna left the stage. There were a select number of his monastic disciples, Ramkrishna's monastic disciples, that were called Ishwarakotis. That means they were perfected prior to coming down. It means that when an incarnation comes, then a whole party come joyously with him, accompanying him, attendants, if you will. The remarkable life of a yogi, though, in general, has some characteristics. What we mean by yoga, what we mean by yogi. Yoga really means some kind of union, assuming there's a separation between our individual soul and a universal one. This is the yoga philosophy position, is a dualistic position. But really, yoga implies that there is also a unity at the end. There never was a separation. That's our highest conclusion. We call this highest conclusion Advaita, or non-dualism. And so when we study the life of a yogi, we expect to see a wonderful progressive adventure through life, from an embodied position all the way through, following their life of discipline, seeing what they did, finding out what model they created for us to follow. And then ultimately, would they then have attained this kind of union for which the designation of yogi implies? He was such a great saint that it fills one with awe to belong, even to the youngest member, to the order that contained him, of the order that contained him. This was the commentary of one who knew him and knew his life. This was a commentary that was given after his demise. And then in this book I'm reading from, which is the biographies of all the apostles of Ramkrishna by Swami Purnananda, he says, Swami Yogananda commanded great love and respect from all the lay and monastic disciples of the Ramkrishna order. Anything beyond that? He was one of those whom the Master spotted out as Ishwarakotis, of eternally perfect, one of the souls which are never in bondage, but now and then come to us, to this world of ours, for guiding humanity Godwards. So what is the evidence of a yogi? An entity that has touched everybody's life in some way, has transmitted, as it were, a flavor of joy everywhere, and uplifted humanity generally. Humanity is much better in the wake of a great mystic or saint or yogi. And these terms are synonymous. If you are a great saint, it means that you have had the flavor of a mystic union that we call yoga. And you cannot hide your bushel under a bed, says Jesus. It has to be a light that will shine obviously everywhere. It'll be in the person's face. It'll be in their demeanor. It'll be in the way they walk. It'll be in the way they sport. This was the life of Swami Yogananda, very aptly named. Of course, he began with a name like that. But from his very childhood, he had this disposition toward meditation. When he was given the sacred thread and he was brought up in a very orthodox family, then he spent much of his time in solitary meditation that seemed very natural to him. His encounter with Sri Ramakrishna was unique because his first encounter was when he was a boy. Now, he came from a very orthodox and aristocratic family, and of course, he had a great deal of pride in it. So, his first encounter with Ramkrishna was one which wasn't obvious. He didn't know it was Ramkrishna. He went into the temple precincts at Dakshinaswar, went into the garden, and there it seems he saw a beautiful flower. And so the boy took a person standing by to be the gardener. He was too proud to pluck the flower himself. His family was above that. And so he says to the gardener something like, "Hey, you, come, pluck the flower, please." I'm presuming he said, "Please." And the man obliged. But another day, the boy saw many people seated in a room in front of that gardener, listening to his discourse. He went into the room where Ramkrishna sat typically, and so, oh, there's the gardener. More than just a gardener. What a mistake to make. And was this then the Ramkrishna of whom Keshav wrote so eloquently that he'd heard of before, because like many of the apostles, most of them, they were members of the Brahma Samaj. And he'd heard about Ramkrishna. And could this be possible? A simple person like this, dressed, walking in the garden casually, and not remonstrating, not saying, hey, I'm Ramkrishna, not the gardener. Pick the dang rose yourself. No, lovingly he did it. Now, how did Ramkrishna transform these young people, these young men and women who came from varied and different backgrounds? How did he manage to knock the kinks out of them to make them superb yogis? It was only one thing he used. Nobody loved them like the Master. The Master was the embodiment of pure love. And when we study these lives, we are not only studying the lives of these great saints, but we're also studying something about Ramkrishna, the teacher, the Master. So there are some demonstrations of this love. Since the young boy was so keen on meditation and spiritual practice from his boyhood, some scholars were there. He was an Ishwarakoti after all, so he was naturally had a bent toward monastic life, celibate life. His family worried about him, and they tricked him and said, and his mother, he was particularly fond of his mother, and begged him to marry. He conceded. He had a very soft nature. He conceded, all right, but then regretted immediately and saw it as a mistake. And he couldn't face Ramkrishna again. He couldn't even go to the temple again. He stayed away. Noticing this, see what Ramkrishna's love and cleverness was. So Ramkrishna knew that he had borrowed some money from the priest for some items, and the change he hadn't returned, some minor amount. And so he said widely, I wonder, you see, why this Yogindra would do this, would be so dishonest as to keep the change. He owes the priest some money. I don't know why he doesn't come and return the money. And when Yogindra heard this, he was mortified and determined, all right, I'll correct things. I'll return this amount of money. And of course, once he did that, and he determined, when I go there and return this, I'll never return again. I'm too embarrassed. And then, of course, Ramkrishna caught him. It was all a ruse to catch him, to get him there. And when he mentioned the money, Ramkrishna dismissed it as unimportant. But the main thing was, he was able to assure Yogindra, look, don't worry. Bring your wife here. You can, no harm will come to you. So the event is mentioned here in this passage, and how Ramkrishna dealt with him and displaced all his fear about this marriage. When the news of all that happened with regard to his beloved Yogin, says the passage, when it reached the ears of the master, he sent information again and again to Yogin to come and see him. But Yogin was reluctant to go. And thereupon the master hit upon a plan to drag him in. And then he tells us, Yogin once took some money from here, that is from a temple officer. It's strange that he has not returned the money, nor has he given any account of that. And of course, when Yogin heard this, his feelings were greatly wounded. And so he remembered the incident. He'd forgotten about it. But because of his marriage, he had felt ashamed to go to the temple. Therefore, he couldn't return the unspent money. Anyway, at the remarks of the master, he was so grieved that he resolved to take the earliest opportunity to return the money. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on his cot when he did this. You know, in his room, 2 cots were there, one for sleeping. Cot is what we call bed. When you go to India, you say cot, you don't say bed. And the other one he used to sit on, where he used to talk. And he had his loincloth on his lap when Yogi came to see him. And putting his cloth under his arm, he ran like a child to receive Yogin as soon as he saw him. And beside himself with joy at the coming of Yogin. Look at that. Look at the expression of love. He was beside himself with joy when this young boy came. About 16 or so, 16, 17 years of age. And then Yogin, of course, explained, he said, what harm if you have married? Marriage will never be an obstacle to your spiritual life. Hundreds of marriages will never interfere with your spiritual progress if God is gracious. One day, bring your wife here. I shall so change her mind that instead of an obstacle, she'll be a great help to you. Thus endorsing the value of marriage, not avoiding it. There are some select people who decide to lead a celibate life, dedicate their life, make a sacrifice in that way for the good of humanity. But the vast majority will be married. That also is a spiritual path. 2 people can help each other in their spiritual life. It's an intrinsic part of the marriage. And Ramkrishna himself was married. So Ramkrishna himself revealed the highest possible expression of married life, that at the spiritual level, not the physical level, the spiritual level. So this is a great help to us. We shouldn't regard it in any way other than that. And you can see how Ramkrishna accepted everything as an expression of divine grace. Everything in this universe is helpful to one. And a real yogi understands this, takes the raw material around us, and using that develops something. We can see in the story of the Ramayana how Ram uses, without any military weapons and so on, uses all the local resources in the form of monkeys, in the form of sticks, stones, whatever is at hand, whatever is available, teaching us a lesson. All the resources we need in spiritual life are right here and now, all around us. We don't have to look for something. We don't have to look for some kind of revelation in the future. It's right here and now. We just have to do a little tuning. So even after marriage, Yogin was indifferent to worldly affairs just as before, because being in Iswarakoti and being destined for monastic life, one of those rare people, rare souls, then naturally that didn't work. And we can see other aspects of how Ramkrishna taught. Yogindra was a very soft-hearted person, very mild-mannered. He was dedicated to non-injury to the nth degree. And so in his mind he wondered, what should we do about pests, about bugs, mosquitoes, etc.? And with this in mind, he went to Ramkrishna and found him cleaning drawers and swatting things and what have you. And he found cockroaches and said, please take these cockroaches, take them outside and kill them. And Yogin took them outside, no doubt, but he thought the master wouldn't notice if he didn't kill them. Then the master said, did you kill them? No, I let them go, he said honestly. No, I told you to kill, and he gave him a rebuke. What is the meaning of it? The meaning of it is that every day when we are breathing, we kill millions and billions and millions of microbes. See the Jains, when they walk around with masks. We've largely adopted it during the COVID ourselves, so as not to breathe in any insect. But no matter how hard you try, we are in the process of birth, life, and death in every avenue and every level of life. And so he was saying, look, we have to be practical. You have to be practical about this. And another occasion, he was on the boat going across to Dakshinaswar, and a conversation arose that was critical of his guru. And he just sat there, didn't say anything, and related to the master. He thought the master would be pleased with his pacifism, with his non-injury aspect. Turn the other cheek. But the master rebuked him again, that you should always defend your guru. Now, in contrast to that, Niranjan, who had a different temperament, similar incident happened. Niranjan's his reaction was, I will rock this boat and turn the whole thing over if you don't retract your statement. And he himself, again, related this to Ramkrishna. Ramkrishna rebuked him. What does it matter what people say about me? See, you're endangering people's lives. So you can see what a beautiful, facile teacher Sri Ramakrishna was, reading the personalities and making the necessary corrections. Another incident was there that really highlighted another side of Yogin, a side that felt that I have to challenge and I have to make sure that the truth is the truth. One day he was sleeping along with the master in the master's room. He woke up in the night and he saw the master was missing. And immediately it came to his mind, oh, he says all these things, about holiness and values and so on. But I wonder, has he gone to visit the mother? Has he gone to where the mother is sleeping? And with that, he got up and was embarrassed to find the master coming back from some, night soil, coming back from the Panchavati. And the master, understanding the situation, he said, no, quite right. You should test your guru. And so in this way, Ramkrishna molded these young men. There was another incident where Ramkrishna was very particular about the food that was given by the Brahmins from the sacrificial offerings. And Yogin thought, why would such a high-minded person, it must be, something to do with his country, traditional upbringing, that he's so particular about the food that should be given to him, exactly the right amount and in the right quantity, and no excess should be wasted. And then he found out, actually, Rani Rasmani had made it a determined part of her will that anything that is offered should be distributed, not given away to relatives or wasted. So to honor her commitment and her wishes, that is why I'm particular. So he understood that even in these small things, Ramkrishna was particular and a good example to follow. Of course, if we're talking about the soul of the yogi, we're talking about Ramkrishna. There's no higher yogi than Ramkrishna. And all these apostles are like so many lamps lit from one central lamp. And the purpose of a lamp is to illuminate other people, not to keep it to yourself, not to be selfish, but to spread, to beam your light and your love everywhere. Why not? And that has a transforming effect in people's lives. The individuality of Yogin was also demonstrated, but also his love for the mother. He accompanied the mother on her pilgrimage after Ramkrishna's demise. He actually even got a mantra from the mother. Ramkrishna had revealed it to the Holy Mother, had not given it to Yogindra. And he was a close companion of the mother and attended to all her needs, as he had attended to Ramkrishna at the Kashipur garden house when Ramkrishna had the throat cancer. Such a loving and giving heart, and yet so dedicated to meditation in a natural way. When he was at Varanasi, he underwent great tapasya, great meditation. It was difficult to draw him out of it. Then you see, that was in 1891, he went to Varanasi where he lived. And he lived in a solitary garden house, absorbed himself in spiritual practices. It's said that during this period, he would grudge the time he spent even for taking meals. He would beg some days some pieces of bread for his food, and for the following 3 or 4 days, these pieces soaked in water would constitute his only meal. And during this time, of course, at that time, there was a great riot in Varanasi. But he commanded such respect in the vicinity that rioters of both sides would not even disturb him. Another characteristic of a yogi, that nothing will disturb him. In the midst of all the turmoil, everybody around him may be mad. Everybody around him may be worried and fearful. But the yogi will be even-minded. What's the basis of the even-mindedness? Because the more you get into a unitary position, oneness, there are less things to fear. And when oneness itself is experienced, there's no second to fear. So fearlessness is also a characteristic of a yogi, that nothing will disturb the equilibrium. You maintain the calmness in all circumstances. Anyway, after Varanasi, he returned to the Mutt at Baranagar. And by this time, because of his disciplines and because of his life, his health was now fairly poor. And but still, he was still bright and smiling despite the illness. Another characteristic of a yogi. So well named he was, Yogananda. But even in the midst of whatever was happening, the internal joy had to bubble through anyway. When the Holy Mother came to Kolkata, Swami Yogananda again became her attendant. Because initially he had gone on pilgrimage with her, one of the select few that accompanied the Holy Mother. And the Holy Mother loved him dearly. So he spent about a year in devoted service to her. And after this, he stayed chiefly at the house of Balaram Bose in Kolkata. And he was now a permanently sick person by this stage. He was a victim of intestinal ailments, digestive troubles. But he was the source of much attraction, even so. So great was his amiability, another characteristic of a yogi, friendly to all, amiable to all, not judgmental, seeing the divine everywhere, in everyone, in everything. So great was his amicability that whoever would come into contact with him would be charmed with him. One would at once feel at home with him. Some young men who got the opportunity of mixing with him at this time afterwards, they were inspired to join the monastic order and become monks. Now, he was also an organizer, so from 1895 to 1897, he managed to organize the public celebrations of the birthday anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna on a very large scale at Dakshinaswar and also at Belur. And these were all very successful celebrations, and all due to his influence, especially his influence of the younger generation. This organizing ability of Swami Yogananda was also evidenced when a grand reception was given to Swami Vivekananda in 1897 when he returned to India from America. Swami Yogananda was the moving spirit behind it. Sorry, let me remove this. Sherwood Forest phoning. Where Swami Vivekananda was, after his return from the West, told his brother disciples about his proposal to start an organization, Swami Yogananda was the person to raise up protests. His individuality there. What was the source of his protest? The source of his protest was that Ramkrishna encouraged us to spend our life in devotional practices, in spiritual practices. He never told us to go here and there doing all this social service in an organized way. And of course, this provoked the great Swami Vivekananda. Very few people dared to risk that, but it was too much for him. And it made him unconsciously reveal a part of his inner life. Swamiji feelingly said, Swamiji meaning Swami Vivekananda, said that he, meaning himself, was too insignificant to improve upon the teachings of the spiritual guru. Sri Ramakrishna, if he, that is Sri Ramakrishna, wanted, he would create hundreds of Vivekanandas just from a handful of dust. But that he made Swamiji simply a tool for carrying out his mission, and Swami Vivekananda had no will but that of the master. This is all the things that Vivekananda had said. Such astonishing faith had the effect of winning over everybody, including Swami Yogananda, immediately. And thereafter, being convinced, he worked. He worked to the extent that he was appointed the vice president of the Ramkrishna order. And when the Ramkrishna Mission Society, as it was originally formed, was actually started, he was appointed without question to this position. We can see that this incident not only was a showing of the power of the individual judgment and of great critical faculty by challenging the leader. Very few people would dare to do that. And yet, he who dared examine the conduct of his guru, if you recall, with a critical eye before fully submitting to him, he could also not spare his guru bhai, his brother disciple. Such boldness and such individuality of thinking, and yet rational when convinced. So here also Swami Yogananda starred in a certain discussion relating to spiritual practices, relating to work. And at first the discussion began as a light-hearted kind of mood on both sides. But gradually Swami Vivekananda became serious till at last he was choked with emotion and found visibly contending with his love for the poor and his reverence for the Guru. Now we get an insight into Swami Vivekananda also. What a tender heart he had. His whole movement was as a result of his sense of compassion for the poor, for the downtrodden, for the suffering. Tears filled his eyes and his whole frame began to shake. In order to hide his feelings, he left the spot immediately. But the atmosphere was so tense that none dared break the silence, even after Swamiji had left. And a few minutes later, some of the Guru Bhais went to his apartment and found him sitting in meditation. his whole frame stiff and tears flowing from his half-closed eyes. What a wonderful, emotional, spiritual scene we can see. And in fact, it was nearly an hour before Swami Vivekananda Swamiji returned to his waiting friends in the sitting room. And when he began to talk, all found that his love for the Master was much deeper than what could be seen from a superficial view. Even when coming under fire, this doesn't seem to be what the Master did or taught. He said, no, this is the voice of the Master. It is out of love for the Master that I'm doing this. What is the difference between the Master and the poor? What is the difference between God and the poor? And all these feelings must have arisen and surfaced and expressed themselves. But he was not allowed to talk on that subject anymore, and Swami Yogananda and others took him away from the room to divert his thoughts. Now Swami Yogananda commanded respect for his sterling saintly qualities. We've mentioned a few of them. But what distinguishes him among the disciples of Master was his devoted service, really, to the Holy Mother. You see, the Holy Mother was only recognized late, the significance, until people thought and understood, no, this is the wife of the Master, and how the Master himself regarded her, and how he worshipped her. So he was one of the earliest monks who discovered the extraordinary spiritual greatness of the Holy Mother that wasn't really externally evident, just like any other ordinary woman on the surface. It was hidden under her rural simplicity of manners. And this is surely evidence of her as the great Maya, whose capacity is to hide things and then project things and ultimately reveal things. And this conviction led to an unquestioning dedication to her cause. He looked to her comfort in every way. And if by chance a few coins were offered to him by somebody, he preserved these all for the mother's use and service. He considered no sacrifice too great for her. This is one of the distinguishing characteristics of Swami Yogananda. And also when he became too weak to attend to all the works of the Holy Mother, a young monk who later became to be known as Swami Dhirananda was taken as his assistant. When the Holy Mother was in Calcutta, naturally many ladies would flock to her. And seeing the situation, Swami Vivekananda once took Swami Yogananda to task for keeping a young brahmacharin as his assistant. For if the celibate life of the young novice was endangered, it would be his responsibility. Came the reply from Swami Yogananda. I am ready to sacrifice my all for him. Imagine. The words were uttered with so much sincerity and earnestness that everyone who heard them could not but admire the large hard-heartedness of Swami Yogananda. Swami Yogananda, in another instant related to the Master, asked him, how do I overcome the idea of sex? And the Master said, pray. Do prayer, increase your prayer. He thought this was not a very inspiring answer, and he thought maybe Ramkrishna didn't know any other answer. And it so happened that there was a Hatha Yogi in the grounds, and he thought maybe I'll find a better answer from him. And so the next visit, instead of going directly to the Master, he made a deviation, and he went to the Hatha Yogi, and was inspired because the Hatha Yogi was a very eloquent speaker. And Ramkrishna came to know this. Ramkrishna appeared or happened to be walking there and gently took Yogananda by the arm and steered him away and said, why didn't you come and see me? Why did you come and see this person? And then he said, you know, this person will make you body conscious, not God conscious. That's why I'm steering away. But Swami Yogananda had suspected, oh, maybe he's jealous of this man. Maybe he wants me all for himself. Until he realized the love of the master. And he decided, let me practice what the master recommended. Prayer. He said it. So let me do that. Wonderfully, he found the solution to all his problems, to such an extent that Swami Vivekananda remarked, amongst all of us, Swami Yogananda is the only one who's completely free of the sex idea. So this was the character of Swami Yogananda. And we can see his independent mindedness. But then once persuaded and seeing the beauty of his great teacher in practicing, he found the simple formula was the effective formula. And the lesson for everybody really is when the Guru says something, we have to have faith in that to the extent that we know when we practice that particular formula, it will work. Now, outwardly, the life of Swami Yogananda was really uneventful. It's difficult to give or find any details, and difficult to find any teachings, if any. And we can't really find the details through which we can really see his personality in any great depth. Only those who moved with him closely could see something of his spiritual eminence. One of the younger members of the Math at that time wrote with regard to him, and I finish now off with where we started. He was such a great saint that it fills one with awe to belong, even as the youngest member, to the order that contained him. Now, of course, we know that he passed away on March 28th, 1899. He was the first among the monastic disciples of the master to enter the Mahasamadhi. And the blessed words that he uttered before his death were, my jnana and bhakti have so much increased that I cannot express them. He began as a pilgrim yogi, and through all the vicissitudes, through all the meditation, through the grace of the Guru, through the grace of the Holy Mother, through the grace of divine circumstances behind him all along, he finally comes to this destiny that jnana and bhakti became the one. A jnani, when fulfilled, will become a lover of God. And the lover of God will become a jnani. All knowledge will be revealed to him or her. An old sannyasin brother who was at his bedside at the solemn moment said that they felt all of a sudden such an inflow of a higher state of being that they vividly realized that the soul was passing to a higher, freer, and superior state of consciousness than the bodily state. Swami Vivekananda was greatly moved at the passing away of Swami Yogananda, very feelingly remarked, this is the beginning of the end. The Holy Mother also said, that's like a brick falling out of the wall of a building. It's an evil omen. She cherished his memory affectionately forever. So this is the life of Swami Yogananda, whose birthday was yesterday. And the book I'm quoting from is called Apostles of Ramkrishna, or actually there's a new edition, which is Disciples of Ramkrishna also, and goes beyond the monastic disciples. And then, of course, there is the other book, comprehensive book, which is God Lived With Them, this life story by Swami Chetananda. And so it is worthwhile studying the lives of all these saints. The real significance is that these are in such proximate closeness to us. You know, 150, 170 years ago. If we were living in the early Christian times, we'd be living in the 2nd century. And so this proximity of these great, great shining lights, if we've happened to come in the field, the environment of these, we are indeed very fortunate. It was Shankaracharya who says in his Viveka Chudamani that you're very, very blessed to get a human body itself. This has happened through many, many births. It's not an easy thing to obtain. And having obtained it, having come across the truth contained in the Vedas, this Vedanta philosophy, is even a greater blessing. To come across an enlightened soul or a guru or a teacher who is close to the divine, who is part and parcel of the cosmic mind, that is an even greater grace. And if you waste this human life with all of these advantages and all of these resources and all of these graces and all of these opportunities to pass unlimited university exams, even in another life, life after life, to waste this one life is equivalent of suicide. So with these few remarks, I know we're finishing a little early, and that's good because we can also make this interactive. So I'm going to release the microphone here and see if there are any other clarifying questions on this subject called Solo Yogi. And so over to you.
Weren't we in his room in
No.
Varanasi?
No, that was...
where was that?
That was Swami Purnananda. Yes, that was in Varanasi, yeah. It was Swami Purnananda's birthday. Swami Purnananda passed away. And I happened to stay in the room next door. Wonderful privilege.
Yeah, I knew that there was something in that room.
Yeah. So for those still listening, So we have one person here who's on pilgrimage with me, and we were in Varanasi. And he says, was this the Swami who passed away? No, it wasn't. It was Swami Purnananda. And our flight was delayed from Varanasi to Kolkata. Most fortunately, because we had to stay over for Swami Purnananda's birthday. And the room in which he passed away is preserved. No one is allowed to go in there. It's opened up to sit there for meditation on the occasion of his birthday, on special occasions. They gave me the room right next door to it. And in its day, it would have been the same room, you know. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, actually. Yeah, divine hand was there saying, no, don't go.
Sorry, a late question.
Yeah.
You were saying about these great men, their presence is still with us and they're in the atmosphere and they're influencing the earth, etc. Can they help with things like the war at the moment and the bitterness that's in the world? I mean, can they bring their goodness and devotion to bear on, I won't mention an obvious man's name, but have they got that sort of influence on the earth?
You see, it's like a lamp that shines. It has a certain range, and it influences according to the power of the light. It influences everywhere. Don't forget, where that person stands is where cosmic mind stands. So it's cosmic mind that's beaming and vibrating everywhere. That's the point. Now, of course, despite that, the world is not comprised only of good. Intrinsically, there has to be bad as along with it. Along with joy and bliss and happiness, there has to be pain and suffering. That's the way the world is. We don't value it like that until we get to the human level. A crocodile doesn't know it's bad to bite somebody's leg off. It doesn't value it in that way. It has no moral compass. But at the human level, we have it. So we have the advantage of relying on moral conscience. When we put that aside, in other words, when ego grows, and an extension of egoism is nationalism. And when all of that grows, all that sentiment, all that compassion, that gets eclipsed. And so when that happens, unfortunately, we become cruel, we become hateful, we become angry, we become selfish. what we are seeing as a situation in a part of the world is nothing more than selfishness under the name of politics and power. And it will pass, that we know. Even the most terrible wars have passed. But the terrible suffering that it brings with us will have consequences for those who produced it. There's no question about it. Now, what can we do now is more of a relevant question. What we can do now is we can try as best we can to live up to that ideal and beam goodness. You see at the beginning of every meditation, and it's according to the first steps of Swami Yoganananda in his Raja Yoga, you say, spread happiness everywhere. We soon learn that the best way, most effective way for us to be happy is to make others happy. Now, this is equivalent to repeating the Gayatri Mantra, because it begins off with Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha. It's now saying there are three worlds, and these three worlds are actually being activated and illuminated by that which lights everything. It's a beautiful prayer, you see. Tat Savitur, the actual Gayatri Mantra starts with Tat Savitur Varinyam, but is preceded by these other Mahavritis, Rahis, such as Bhu Bhuva Swaha. So what it means is, Bhu is this observable universe, the things that we can see. When we look at the universe and interpret it and say it is what it is, then we're looking at what the eyes can see and what the ears can see, even by extension through instruments. All right. But then beyond the universe, beyond the observable universe, what is there? There must be another level, sublime level there. And so that's Swa. And then what about in between? In the human person, these three appear as waking, that is Bhu, dream, that is Bhuha, and Swa, that is dreamless sleep. So cosmically, this is happening. So when we bless all these things, what we're doing is we're sending a current of holy thought. This is Vivekananda's language, sending a current of holy thought everywhere. Is it effective? Of course it's effective. Should we be doing it? We should be doing it. What we call prayer, we should be doing. Now you see, it has to be a non-begging kind of prayer. That means, yeah.
A non-what?
A non-begging.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Not looking. It's not.
It has to be an assertive prayer.
It's not a cash register.
That 2 and 2 equals 5. Yeah.
See, already accomplished is my formula. Already accomplished. Not even with a question mark. Already accomplished. So I give you the example. We had a course in Zimbabwe, the normal Enneagram course over 2 weekends. Then second weekend, I said, how are things, And one person who happened to be a number 8 actually said, oh, I went to a prayer meeting. Something like 80,000 people in a stadium, all praying for rain because they were in the middle of a drought. I was absolutely appalled. I was absolutely astonished and appalled. I thought it was absolutely disgusting. I said, it seems like a good idea to pray for rain. He says, no, you don't understand, Swamiji. Not one person brought an umbrella. So this is the way faith works. An unwavering conviction. Like posting a letter. Post it and leave it. Don't look to see when is the postman coming. Just leave it. Don't counter it with another thought, a doubt, a fear. Put it in and leave it with the divine process. The divine mailman comes and collects it. You don't have to worry about it. Put it in once, leave it. See, so many people come, oh, will you help me? Will you pray for this, pray for that, and so on and so forth. Yes, okay. And all I'm saying is, from the cosmic mind's point of view, already accomplished. Thank you.
So,
the only thing I have to do is thanks. That's all.
So would that apply in the case of Swami Yogananda and the sex thing, he asked Ramkrishna, and Ramakrishna's answer was prayer.
Well, yes, because prayer means...
Would he have assumed, chastity or continence?
Yeah, prayer. See, prayer in this sense means, in that sense, would be to say, okay, I want an honest dialogue. This is where I am. I'm not denying it, and I'm presenting it to you. This is not my problem anymore. As soon as I present it to you, it's no longer my problem, and you do the rest, please. The lion's share is done by God, not by us. We can look at the universe, but we can never spin a galaxy.
Just getting back to that question I asked about the great men have, and I presume continue to have, if they weren't there, would the situation be even worse?
Oh, yes. These great men are there as an antidote as well. And these incarnations are there as an antidote, the primary antidote. So these beings are branches from this one central light, this avatar. Avatar means some entity that descends. So in the theory of the avatar, we rate Ramkrishna, although we don't publicly state it, but we rate Ramkrishna as avatar for this age, himself declaring it.
And you also said that people who perpetrate this horrible suffering, they all answer for it at the end of the day. One's actions are not dismissed.
If you suffer, you will suffer more. Because you see, these people who are imposing suffering on others are themselves suffering and will suffer, unfortunately.
Stupidity, really, isn't it?
Yes, but we're all stupid. I'm stupid. I don't know about you.
Yes.
The odd time.
We're all fools dancing in God's dance. What can we do? We're all children of God. See how Ramkrishna, Yogin comes to him, and he's so pleased to meet him. He's sitting there with his loincloth on his lap. He gets up. He doesn't put the loincloth on. He tucks it under his arm and goes like a child, you see. We're all children. I'll always remember the General Secretary. Some of you may remember the visit of Amala Prana, Prabhupada Amala Prana, General Secretary of the Sharda Math. And she came to visit, and I introduced her, General Secretary, this and that. She looked at me with a reprimanding but motherly look. And then when she came to speak, she said, yeah, you may say all this, but I'm just a child of the mother. Now she's an elderly woman, I'm just a child of the mother. As soon as we put ourselves in that position, then it's a position of absolute faith. The child has no difficulty in thinking that they will be dropped by the mother, or the mother will, hesitate in carrying them or not hold them closely. The child instinctively knows it. So that kind of thing, you have to be childlike and not childish. So I hope that you will read this and other lives of these great saints that inspire us all. And while we may fall short of these great ideals, we shouldn't stop trying to match up to them. We will find that in the midst of many problems and difficulties, these difficulties start dissolving when we start living the principles and life that we are espousing. There are many institutions dedicated to philosophical knowledge. There are many institutions that practice yoga of different kinds. But it is in your waking life, it is in your normal, everyday approach, the way you react to life, that is the test of your inner life. And if that is not steady and stable, if that is not full of this divine connectedness, then the rest of your life will not reflect it. And therefore, what we think, our thought is intrinsically a suction. It draws things toward us. And whatever our environment is what has been creatively produced by this wonderful, wonderful, powerful ingredient called thought. It acts like an incorrigible laser beam that sends itself directly and powerfully and becomes a revealer. So let us use this light in terms of our concentration and our spiritual practice so that we can open up our own inner realms and find and discover our own true nature. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.